Hi there. First, I'd like to thank Daniel and the ArcLight community for allowing me to be this month's guest and answer questions around architecture and its place in agile ways of working. What is the dichotomy between architecture, agility, and the modern enterprise? We have 9 great questions. I've kept the answers concise, otherwise this would be a 2-hour plus video. But feel free to get in contact with me for more detailed discussion into any of these topics later. My name is Adam Mitchell. I'm a SAFE SPC 50 consultant and trainer. I've worked in the Middle East in aviation, central governments in the UK, banking in the US, and most things in between. I love working with enterprises to help them understand what value is and then to get that value to their customers as quick as possible. And I also love flying. I really love flying. So questions, what do we have? First up, does architecture have a place in Agile? Yes, it does. Great answer, thank you. What is the role of the enterprise architect in companies with established agility? Great question. It's a term that often gets misused. Now, we're not talking about a system architect who's just looking after a system. Neither are we talking about a solution architect who may be looking after a few systems. We are talking about an enterprise architect. So they should be across multiple value streams, across multiple portfolios. We're not expecting them to just have a technical focus at this level. I would expect an enterprise architect to be cross-domain. So they should be, yes, of course, technical architecture, application architecture, information architecture, data architecture, business architecture, very important. The architect should be really helping to drive the strategy for enterprise architecture across the organisation. So that's going to be feeding in from things like the infrastructure strategy, the solution architecture strategy. What tech are we going to use and how are we going to use it? How are we going to implement our business proposition back into the customer? The enterprise architect should be driving the strategy on how the enterprise can embrace organisational change faster and ultimately get that more competitive advantage. The strategy is going to encompass various different things. What tech are we going to use? How are we going to use it? How are we going to implement it? How are we going to platform it? So infrastructure strategy, solution architect strategy. How are we going to engage with the various business areas across the multiple portfolios that we have? I expect my enterprise architects to help then communicate that vision and that strategy across to other system and solution architects and also to non-technical stakeholders. You can further drive this by participating in the BLACE, so Lean Agile Centre of Excellence, or whatever framework you have set up to really foster and drive technical agility. The communication with the business by the enterprise architect is really important. At this level, we're going to have to put forward enablement epics, a big infrastructure pieces of work. These are going to be going head to head with large, potentially revenue generating or feature pieces of work. How do we have that conversation? If, for example, you are asking for $5 million to move your estate to platform as a service, I'd expect you to do that via an enablement epic that can support lean budgeting. Now, how can you get iterative funding for this? How can you utilise set-based design to test multiple vendors at once? You should be triaging innovation ideas across the enterprise, really trying to drive that relentless improvement that SAFE talks about. Good answer, thank you. Next question. What are the main challenges you have faced when moving an enterprise closer towards agile practices? Doing agile to team level is relatively simple. It gets a lot harder when you try and do this across a large portfolio or an enterprise, mainly due to the fact of different silos competing against each other. Agile at an enterprise level is harder due to the silos and the fact that in most cases the silos will conflict with each other. For example, you'll have a business area here that in order to meet their KPI, that will cause a detriment to a silo over here. But because that's what they're judged on, that's what their bonus is, then it doesn't matter. And there's no overarching sort of theme, or there's no strategic theme that's going to join all these together. And that's the hardest bit, is getting people aligned. You have your hierarchy here that sort of emerged over the past few decades, but it doesn't map to where the value is. So trying to align those, that's definitely the hardest bit. Kotter talks about a dual operating system. So we have a hierarchy that gives us the stability large enterprises need. In parallel to that, we have our sort of entrepreneurial network that gives us the speed and innovation which we need for business agility. So by using SAFe 5.0 and organising that second operating system around value streams rather than departments, it really helps us get rid of those silos. If you don't move people around the value, then you're always going to be capped at how much change you can get a business to embrace. Team level agile is pretty easy. Program, okay, a bit trickier but doable. Portfolio and enterprise, unless you rearrange around the value, you're always going to hit a ceiling due to those conflicting priorities between the silos. Good answer, thank you. When moving an architecture towards SAFe, what are the key changes that you need to introduce as the first big steps? Okay, quite a common question, this one. The business need to understand architecture. Traditionally, architecture was something that you discussed up front over here, it was decided, and that was it. It stayed the same throughout the life of a project. Okay, we want to move to being more product-centric. Your products should anticipate change. Okay, but you're saying, my products stay the same, we don't need to change. Well, then you're probably not doing your job as a product manager. Likewise, from an architectural point of view, we should be designing architecture that is emergent and, importantly, is consumed at the right time. So in order to do that, we need to prioritise those with the revenue driving business features. How do we do that? We need a common language. So something like weighted shortest job first is great for this, because it really helps explain sort of the time criticality and the revenue benefits of doing certain architectural work. Therefore, we can explain that in a dollar and cents parlance that the business will understand. Thank you. Any tips for how business architecture and IT strategy works alongside product teams in SAFe? Okay, LPM in SAFe, that's Lean Portfolio Management. Something that aligns the strategy against the execution of what the enterprise is delivering. So an LPM has 3 component parts: Lean Governance, Strategy and Investment Funding, and the Agile Portfolio Operations. The strategy and investment funding, a great area for sort of senior execs, enterprise architectures to get involved. Is the portfolio aligned? Is it correctly funded? And is it maintaining the solutions needed to meet those important business targets? Agile Portfolio Operations, this is the coordination and support of the arts. So making sure we are getting the value out the door, and we're doing that with consistent excellence. This would be like RTEs, Scrum Masters, community practices, all that good stuff. And then Lean Governance, so enterprise architectures, business owners, and again, Agile PMO. So the oversight and the decision making, audit, compliance, how we can sort of forecast and then in turn budget, and all the important measurements that go with large scale deliveries. Great answer. What are the key benefits to introducing SAFe to a business that has typically worked to a process such as TOGAF? It's not as Boolean in that, it's got to be SAFe, it's got to be TOGAF. TOGAF used correctly is great. I've seen organisations that really thrived from it. I suppose the value add for using SAFe in addition to that is who gets excited that TOGAF went from 9.1 to 9.2? I would guess a select few architects. The first bit of TOGAF is, the architectural vision. But again, who does that get articulated to? Who understands it? Whereas if you use that in reference to SAFe, SAFe encourages and sort of forces the architecture to have discussions with the business, to be part of PI planning and articulate what their vision is, what those enablement features are that we are going to do over the next 3 months. They're on hand to review it, to act as SMEs where appropriate, to discuss the architecture runway with the business, to discuss prioritization of features using weighted shortest job first, what is the economic benefit or the risk reduction of doing this feature. So it takes the good ideas from TOGAF, but makes them a lot more available and a lot more transparent. And the fact that everyone should be talking about architecture, just like we encourage moving testing to the left, the same that we should do with things like governance, the same should happen with architecture. The architecture should be accessible by anyone. Also, by using the LACE, Lean Agile Centre of Excellence, and things like community of practice, we get to spread all the good knowledge that is in TOGAF amongst the entire art. So it's not a case that we have 1 or 2 people with that real expert knowledge here. That's good, but what we want is that distributed via the systems teams into the Agile teams themselves. How long would you say it typically takes to see the benefit of moving a full architecture towards Agile? Not to use the answer, it depends, but with this one, it kind of does depend. Are we talking a small CRM or are we talking a mission critical flight system? It's going to vary depending on what architecture you're talking about porting. But as far as benefits, you should start seeing these instantly. The fact that we are going to force the engagement with the architecture. They're going to be there during PI planning, helping to say what the architectural vision is going to be. What are those infrastructure enablers or the changes we're going to make to our infrastructure over the next 3 months? They'll be engaged throughout the course of the 4 or 5 iterations, and then they'll be there to play back to a system demo. Done. I'm a strong believer in building solutions with flexibility in mind for the future, but it always comes at a cost. Any tips for making it cheaper? Good question. Nothing is free. Everything comes at a cost. I suppose it's how do you articulate the cost of not doing this? So, case in point at the moment. Great example, the government says payment holidays for everyone on your mortgages. Hooray! You'd assume that it's been architectured correctly, so someone goes into mainframe config, payment holiday, 3 months, change the config, test it in UAT, test it in staging, up to prod, out in a couple of days. There's certain banks in the UK at the moment that didn't build in any form of payment holidays to their mortgages because they thought, we don't offer it, it'll never happen. So in essence, now they're having to re-architecture an entire product solution just to react to what the government came up with. So then you're into the realms of, known unknowns and unknown unknowns. You just need to discuss with the business that you're spending the money now in order to offset future losses that may come up during those known unknowns. For example, what is your mean time to recovery, MTTR? Good measure for DevOps. If you lost your entire customer-facing platform, how long does it take it to get back up with your current architecture? Are we talking hours? Are we talking days? Are we talking weeks even? If you were to lose your entire customer base for one business day, what's the cost of that? Do you even know what the cost of that is? You hear it a lot. It won't happen to us. We're too big to fail. We've seen this numerous times with high street banks in the UK. So as far as making it cheaper, I really wouldn't. Why would we want to? We don't want to compromise. It's more about spending the money now and be able to articulate that and importantly prioritise that with the business for things that are going to come up. So as far as making it cheaper, not really. It's a case that we are investing that money now to make the enterprise more resilient in the future. So that should give us a better return on investment. Final question. What's the best example you've come across of any architecture team supporting agile change delivery, and how did that work in practice? Okay, theory is good. What's it like in the real world? So the best example of engagement between architecture and agile I've seen is when I worked for an aviation client out in the Middle East. If you ever get a chance to work within sort of the commercial aviation sector, do it. It's fantastic. The scale of the operations are just completely mind-blowing. But anyway, we had a agile cohort that was embedded in the ART, the Agile Release Train, because it was a safe shop. And some of the problems we're trying to address were around crew rostering and the inefficiencies. So the architects created a brilliant solution. We're going to implement MI via AI to run a SaaS, and we're going to host that via virtualization on a PaaS. Okay, I'm half smart, technical background, I understand what they said. But anyone that doesn't understand sort of cloud architecture, machine learning, artificial intelligence, is not going to have a clue. Especially the business, when you're trying, in essence, ask for X million dollars for this. So what they did was they had the technical statement, how they talked to each other, but when they engaged the art, we got crew members. So we got crew members from the airline to come in, to be seconded within the teams, to act in essence as SMEs, and they would sort of explain the problem with the architects. So, two examples. You have 10 crew members on reserve turning up to a flight where only 2 crew members have phoned in sick. So obviously 2 will get taken to the aircraft, there'll be substitutes, the other 8 will get paid for the day and get sent home. Plus then they've worked some of their hours even though they haven't flown, so that's going to affect their future rosterings because you're limited the amount of sort of hours you can fly within a set period. Hours you can work within a set period. And on the other side to that, we would have reserve crew turn up to a stand, ready, chance anyone phones in sick, to find out that the flights have been cancelled. Again, hugely inefficient because you have to pay them and send them home. But then it's coupled that with the tacit thing that, we know it's always the same people that phone in sick, we know it's the same flights that get cancelled. So if only we had something that could take that information, do something magical in a black box, and then allow us to better rosters, a more dynamic rostering. So one, it won't annoy us. We, give up our spare days, go to the airport, nothing happens, to go home again. And 2, ultimately cut down on the OPEX of the airline as well. So you have to make the architecture real. You have to make it engaging. You have to make it interesting, and not just for techie people. If you can make architecture live and breathe throughout your entire program, that's sort of the ultimate nirvana for agile in an enterprise that's trying to get to that sort of business agility. Thank you, and that wraps up all the questions that we've been asked.